Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to do my best with this because I'm probably the least prepared of any of the six. I have to go on after Amanda, who is incredible. I've gone to the bathroom 3 times since I got here, and I'm dressed what could be charitably called a presidential candidate you forgot about working the Iowa State Fair. So here's my story about Tucson music. I just finished reading this book called Because Internet, which is about how the internet has changed the way we communicate. And my story is not about that at all, but the book talks about full internet people compared to semi-internet people. Full internet people are the ones sort of trapped by the hellscape of social media, where you've sort of grown up in that space and you're fully informed by it. This is probably me, because most of my career has come from the internet. And then there's semi-internet people who are sort of adjacent to it. And I always wanted in my entire life probably to be a full Tucson music person. And at best, I've probably been like a semi-Tucson music person. But still, the soundtrack of the city has permanently changed my life. Like a lot of people, I moved here because of the military, and music was the one thing that my emotionally abusive father and I could talk about. And so, you know, growing up here, I started to get away from the like 60s like pop music and classic rock that he enjoyed, and was listening to the radio. And at the time, there was all this incredible local radio. KLPX would play the test department on Sunday nights, and I would hide the radio under my pillow so I could listen to whatever new Depeche Mode song was coming on, which dates me as being 1 million years old, and I am aware of that. And also Power 1490, this brief, glorious run of this hip-hop station was all locally programmed. They had a van that drove around town, and it was something that music would upset my father. So this also worked out really, really well. If you can find music that upsets your parents, that's always a plus. But from then, I made most of these choices based on music. That was how I was connecting to the world. You know, I believe there's some sort of immunity for discussing things in storytelling. So just as a heads up, but I stole a copy of Rolling Stone's Top 500 Albums issue from the local ABCO. ABCO is also closed, so good luck getting your money from me, jerks. And covered my notebook in middle school with pictures of English bands that would just alienate me from everyone else, which was a really good strategy. So, you know, from there I went into high school, and well, before high school even, I was going to church, and people at church listened to music, which was almost sort of more regrettable, but it led me to going to my first concert to see Stryper at the Saguaro High School Gymnasium. To answer all of your questions about that show, they did wear all leather. It was all yellow and black. They played a song called To Hell with the Devil, and they threw out Bibles from the stage. So, excellent entertainment all the way around. And people from there, I had much better friends at church who took me to better shows, which was a plus. In high school, I found the Downtown Performance Center, operated by local eccentric Stephen I, which I believe he would probably be okay with that terminology. And it opened a door to a whole bunch of new shows, and my Christian youth group friends took me to see a youth group adjacent band, The Threshing Floor, that played there, who were the coolest people I'd ever seen in my life. Cooler than Stryper, which is hard to believe. And still, later on I ended up working at Clear Channel, which was a terrible job, but I ended up getting to work with Chris O'Gorman, who was in The Threshing Floor, and I could barely talk to him. Still, like 20 years later, he's a local morning show DJ now, and I'm just like, I can't even look at you. You were in The Threshing Floor. And he's like, please stop talking about that. Which is fair. But you know, high school, the job I had was to make money to like buy cassettes at the warehouse and to pay for prom at a place called Petrillo Luth Research, which was one of those places that called and interrupted your dinner. And it will perhaps forever be imprinted on my brain, the speech I would give to people. And if this sounds familiar to you, I'm sorry. My name is Dan. I'm calling from Opinion Research Corporation in Princeton, New Jersey. I just wanted to call and ask you a few questions about your phone experience. Turns out people do not want to talk about their phone experience, but they do have time to shout profanities at the phone while they're hanging up on you. So, worked out great. I quit that job the day before prom. It turned out just fine. And I left high school, graduated high school and left and spent one glorious year at Arizona State University. And I'm sorry for that, as I understand. people's feelings about that. I wasn't there long. I spent more time out of class at the Tower Records next to the campus, which turned out to not be a great choice either. It turns out the student loan money you spend on CDs, you need to go to class to get that student loan money later. Unaware. No one told me. Regrettable. And to my son, don't do that. Just please, it really helped. Yeah, I know, that's right. You don't even need to anymore. And so coming back from college, my brief stay at college, I went back to work, and I was making money that I was still spending on way too much CDs and seeing more live music, which is incredible. And then at that point, I started dating my wife for the second time, which is like a long story about why it's the second time, but I thought it was a really great idea to woo her by taking her to concerts. Pre-date, before we were like dating, I took her to see Ben Folds 5 at the fair. Romantic. And then a Zydeco concert at St. Philip's, Zydeco, and where we had our first kiss again, and it worked out just fine, seemingly, because she's here. And so it's a lot to ask of her after 20 years. And her investment in someone who had a better record collection than job prospects, probably not so smart either. But thank you, Tara, for that. Yeah, you got nothing. That's almost certainly not true. But from there, I got fired from a job at a printing place, which was totally 100% my fault. And the next day in the newspaper, there was an ad for a job at Here's Music, which you may or may not remember because it doesn't exist anymore, but it was a record store, mostly CDs, on Campbell, and they sold jazz and world music and stuff like that. And the gimmick was that you could listen to any CD in the store, which some people would come in and listen to basically all the CDs in the store, which was sort of a pain working there. But it was such a glorious thing in this era before you could listen to any CD on your phone. And Here's was the closest, it was like a brush with being a full Tucson music person. It felt so good. It was like right there. Because like the local musicians were coming in, like the guys from Calexico were coming in and buying like weird jazz CDs from France, and we would talk about them. Like that, I was never going to perform anywhere. This is about as close as it gets if you do not count a very stylized performance of Pointer Sisters' Jump recently at a karaoke night at Tap and Bottle, which I thankfully do not remember at all, and I'm hoping that's the same of most people. So, whoosh, bad ideas. But it was so exciting then because you could access all of it. And the best thing about music in this town is that there's just there's no gatekeeper of cool. Like, you can just be there. If you want to shake your ass at El Tambo on a Friday night at Hotel Congress, no one stops you. If you want to talk to these bands, if you see a band at the Rialto, they're probably going to be at the patio of Congress afterwards, so you can meet them. It's this glorious lack of pretension that this town has. And that was what was so thrilling to me as semi-music person, was that I could just be there next to it. We moved to Los Angeles because when we were pregnant, I don't know what people say. When we got pregnant, I don't know. She did the work. And so working at a record store is a classically bad idea at that time, so we moved to Los Angeles, which is also a classically bad idea, but it was a place with better health insurance. And in Los Angeles, that wasn't there. It was an amazing time. To be around music, and I had the experience of seeing my wife bump her pregnant belly into the members of Hanson. Where does that happen? It's amazing. But still, everything was this gateway. If you missed the 5 minutes a show was on sale, you weren't going. It's if you even knew about it at all. But after my brief stay in Tucson, in Los Angeles, we came back, and it was still there. We got to see these amazing shows. Steve and I had moved on from what I believe was the condemned Downtown Performance Center to opening a soon-to-be-condemned Solar Culture, which he was still putting on these amazing shows. Arcade Fire played there in a gallery that you could semi-legally bring your own beer. It was an incredible experience. And that stuff is happening, still this day. And I ended up being the online editor, a title I made up, and then the editor of the Tucson Weekly. And I tried to bring as much music to that space as possible. Again, trying to inch closer, just a little bit closer to being full Tucson music person. amazingly, when my time at the Weekly was over, my time as the adjacent to Full Music person ended too, because it turns out bands were less interested in hanging out or talking when I couldn't publicize them, which is understandable. But it was an exciting time too to like still uncover all this music that I just wasn't as close to. I grew up around indie and college rock, alternative, whatever you call it. But then you just discover like there's so much amazing music happening, you know, in the tonal autumn and Pasquiaki traditions, and the, you know, hearing chicken scratch and all this amazing stuff. And then the local hip hop community, which is so much more vibrant and amazing than I think anybody possibly gives it credit for. All this stuff was still so accessible, and no gatekeeper, you can just be there. And now in my current job at Visit Tucson, we've tried to still tell a few more stories about music, and it's again that adjacency, just trying to be a little bit closer. You know, we wrote a story about Tucson music and how to see it in our visitor guide 2 years ago. Rusty Boulay-Stevenson has been incredible at Visit Tucson about getting local music into our ads, which seems like this weird semi-revolutionary concept, but then sort of obvious when you do it. Like, you want Tucson to sound like Tucson, and it does. And it's such an amazing thing. And as I get older, and my wife and I said we were going to go to a show every month this year, and we have not done a good job. But it's still, there's so much happening all the time. And now as you get to experience music through my kids' eyes, who are looking through the listings at 191 Tool to see bands they love. You know, to have that experience, to be adjacent to that. And I took my son and his friend to see a band, Video Age, you know, and I kept my helpful distance, you know. I was over by the bar, they were over on the other side, you know. But still, you run into someone you know there, and you get to talk about music, this amazing thing that runs through the fabric of this city. And so, you know, I think I've probably given up on being a full Tucson music person. I don't think that's likely to happen. But I hope that I still can continue being a part of that story in the most minor way. You know, just even adjacent is still good enough. And I hope that as my kids encourage me to see new music and be more excited about things, that someday their kids might be willing to push my wheelchair up to the side of the stage at Hotel Congress so I can still see this amazing stuff happening. So thanks so much.